What if I told you you could make 4 gorgeous paper flowers, the hyacinth, the rose, lavender, and tissue paper blooms with nothing more than scissors and paper? No Cricut, no silhouette, no special templates, and no fancy tools. Just you, some paper, and a few minutes to yourself. Let's start off going through the tissue paper flowers, one of my favorites. So let's jump in. The supplies that we need to make this craft is a piece of tissue paper. You're gonna need a little bit of either matching yarn to tie it up, or if you have staples and a stapler, you can use that instead, and scissors or a paper cutter, depending on what you prefer to use. The first thing that we want to do is we want to fold our tissue paper into halves. Now, each tissue paper size is going to be a little bit different depending on where you buy it from, but I just have sort of a standard piece that I got left over from a birthday. I'm going to fold this in half. And it doesn't need to be perfectly straight, but it helps just for later on. I'm going to fold this once in half, and then I'm going to fold it in half again. And I'm going to fold it again. Now I folded this so that it is just about 10 by 6. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually cut this down. So this is 8 sheets right now. So I've got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is 8 sheets. I don't want to fold it too much because if I fold it too much, it's actually not going to work out. The flower is going to be too busy. So for a 5 by 5, which is what we'll be making, we're going to want this to be about, we'll need 8 pieces. Now I'm going to cut this a little bit more than 5 because at the end of the day, there's a lot of extra that I have to cut off because we want to have each piece individual. So we don't want to have any folds left in our design. So I'm going to cut all the sides off with my paper cutter. Hopefully it will not jam on me. Now it's okay if things don't cut perfectly because when it's all crumpled up later, it's not going to make a huge difference. So now we have about, if all went well, a 5 by 6. That's too, it's all right. Doesn't need to be perfect. Ideally a square is what we want. Now we're simply going to fold this into an accordion. Now it's harder to see this when it's all loose and flimsy. I want it to sort of look like this. Next what I'm going to do is I have my matching yarn. If you have a stapler, you can use a stapler instead. I don't, so I'm just using yarn because I happen to have lots of yarn. Just going to wrap my yarn in the middle. Okay, like so. Now for this one, I'm going to give it a, you want to cut the ends just so that they have a shape. This will change the way the flower looks. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And every type of different end that you create will have sort of a different look of flower. Okay, so we've got 2 pointed ends there. Now that I've got my tissue paper folded and cut, I'm going to fan this out like so, a little bit, and then I'm going to pull out the tissue papers. Now what you want to do is the first pages are going to kind of come out far, far, far right to the middle, and as you come out towards the end, they're going to be less far out. Okay, that's the one side. And then we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. And there's our one flower. Now I've gone ahead and I've made a few other ones with different ends so that we can see what those look like as well. So I'm quickly going to fast forward through those and we'll show you what the flowers look like with those ends. So we'll have a flat end, a ruffled end, and a round end. So when we leave the end flat and straight, we're going to have sort of a wavy flower. I don't even know what I would call this type of a flower. With the ruffled ends, we're going to have a carnation type flower. If we do a round end or a semicircle, you'll have something that resembles a peony or a rose. And if you have a triangle end, you'll have a dahlia or a daisy type flower. You can always experiment with different types of ends to see what kind of flowers you get and which ones you like the best. So I quickly just wanted to walk you through a difference here that I've done. So the flowers along the bottom row have 8 sheets of tissue paper and the flowers along the top have 6 pieces of tissue paper. Now there's not much difference in the way that they look. They all kind of look pretty nice. So you could use 6 or 8 pieces, but I want to point out that if you use too many pieces of tissue paper, you're going to end up with like this ball of stuff. Now this one has like 12 pieces and it's just way too much. I can't even like get this to look like a flower. It kind of looks like just like a bunch of stuff. So this is the same size and same cut with 6 versus 12. So you can do too much. There is the ability to do enough. And then if you're doing like bigger flowers, you need more. So this is only 8 pieces on a big flower. This was a 8 by 8, I think. And you can see it's just not enough. So the number of sheets of tissue paper that you need does vary on the size. A 5 by 5 tissue paper works well with 6 or 8 pieces of tissue paper. If you want the flowers bigger, you will need more pieces, but it's more of a trial and error thing. I've tried different numbers and for the size that I have here, these 5-inch flowers, 6 and 8 pieces is good. When I was making the smaller size ones, the ones with only 6 petals in them, I had a little bit of extra paper left over. So what you can do, and I just want to show you, is you can do like a whole bunch of different colors with them, and that's totally cool too, right? So I'm going to do the blue, orange, red, pink, and red. And so I'm just going to fold these into the same idea, but I'm going to leave the pink a little bit shorter so that it's smaller in the area there, and that's going to give it a little bit of a different look. And what I'm going to do with these center pieces, now that they've all been folded together, I'm just going to quickly snip these ones differently than the other ones so that they kind of look like little inner flower sections. And I'm going to squish it back into place. And now this will fit right back into here, like so. And now we're going to tie this up. And now these bits I'm just going to round off so that they're not so probably could have done that when they were not together. And again, this time we're going to make sure that we're folding outward with the pink in the middle. If you're enjoying this video so far, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more crafty moms out there. So we've got some options of different flowers that we can do. So if you do different colors on this one, you can make it look like a different type of flower. But we've also got all of our other options as well that we've done with these flowers. So the one thing that I like to do when I make flowers is I like to actually put them on stems, and I find that not everywhere can you find that information. So I bought these little stems here that I bought, and I'll drop the link below in the video. But these ones have like a thicker body part and a thin sort of end piece here. And this is really convenient for these flowers because if you just bend it with some pliers, because I'm obviously too weak to do it by hand, and you've got like a little shape like that, you can actually fit this into your flower body here. and get it right over there, and then it sticks into your flower, and then you got a stem for it. So this is how I'm doing all of them. You can add like a little piece of greenery down here to cover the bottom, but I mean, you're really looking at the top of the flowers. So I'm quickly going to redo all of my flowers with stems, and then I'll be able to put them into a vase so that they can stand nicely. The last thing I want to just say is, if you're putting stems on and you're worried that the paper and the stem aren't going to hold on together, you can always just dab a little bit of hot glue onto here. And that's just what I'm going to do, just because I don't want them to come off, and I don't want too much, just a little bit to hold it in place, and then that's enough. And this is optional, but I like to do this just a little bit at the end so that my flowers don't come off of the stem, just in case I start to move them around too much. That way, when I'm arranging them, they won't fall out of the stems. Those tissue paper blooms look amazing, am I right? Up next, we're going to do something different and move over to make some paper lavender. It looks intricate, but I promise you it's a lot easier than it looks. To make our lavender stalks, all I'm using some purple cardstock and some metal stems. You can use different shades of purple if you'd like, or you can even use different materials. I'm going to walk you through doing it with paper, but I'm also going to show you some end results using different fabrics and stuff to make this as well. For the lavender stalks, what I do is I've bypassed using my Cricut on this one because I just didn't feel like having it cut a lot of paper for me. And I thought I could do this faster. But what I want to do is I want to measure out 1.5 inches on my paper cutter, and I'm going to cut this. And I'm going to cut a bunch of this in the dark purple and in the light purple, so that I've got a few pieces to work with, and I'll show you how to make this work out really nicely. So now I've got a bunch of different pieces of paper. I'll need quite a few of these for this project to have a lot of lavender sheets. One thing I'm going to do is on each of these pages, I'm going to score a line right down the center so that I've got an easy way to fold this. It doesn't need to be perfectly in the center. It's just so that it makes it a little bit easier. It doesn't have to be perfect though. I don't like scoring with my Cricut because I find that the pen after a while jumps out, and then I have to do it by hand anyways. If you don't want to score it, you could just cut these to a smaller size and do it like that instead, and that's fine as well. I just don't feel like cutting many times, but it makes no difference scoring or cutting. So now that I've got these all scored, I'm quickly going to just fold them so that I have a bunch of folded pieces. Now instead of folding them, I could just use regular pieces like this and have them loose on both sides, but I find that this has a nicer little edge to it when it's folded instead of being cut. So now that I've got all these folded, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my scissors and I'm going to cut some slices into this. Don't want them to be too far, but I want to have a little bit of space left here. And I'm just going to cut them. They don't need to be the same width or length for each of them, just some random lengths. And I'm going to do this for all of my pieces. Sometimes you might find that your score line didn't get scored right in the center and you're going to have an offset like that. That's okay. Just make sure when you're cutting it, you're cutting with the shorter side facing forward so you know how far to cut to get through the top shorter layer of paper as well. Okay, so after having spent like 10 minutes cutting all these out, I'm going to go back to my computer later and make a file for this because my finger is like red here from using my scissors so much. And I've nicely cut through a bunch of these all the way through instead of having them all the way as one long piece. So these pieces are salvageable. I'm going to use these purple bits inside the dark purple bits, and the same thing with this one here that's broken, so that I'm able to use them so they don't need to be thrown out. It's time to start making our flowers. So we have a few options here. Something that we can do is we can do just dark purple and just light purple. We can do light purple sort of tucked inside of dark purple. Let me just get this like this, if I can do this. Have it like sort of the two tucked into each other, or we can have them tucked in the opposite way, and it's just going to give us a different color. I'm going to do all 4 combinations. I'm going to do light purple, dark purple, and the combination of dark purple on the outside and then light purple on the outside so that we can see what they look like. But it just gives us a different kind of look on each flower, even though it's the same sort of design. So for the ones where I'm going to have 2 colors, so the dark purple and the light purple, I'm just going to do a light bead of glue on the inside here, especially with these broken ones so that they stay in place. But I don't really need to use too much glue. You can use like some of this double-sided rolling tape, something like this, where it's like a tape roll and you pull on it. I find that after a while that tape lets loose and we don't like to lose bits, so I'm not going to use that. Just going to glue this guy in here all the way and close this up. I'm going to do the same thing with my other purple one so that doesn't get wasted. Alright. And then we're going to do a dark purple and a light purple. So now with this, I'm going to start off with just a simple one piece. And I'm going to apply some glue, just a dab of glue along the edge here on the back of this. Now again, if you want to, you can use this kind of double-sided tape. I'll just show you on the scrap here. It just comes off. You can just, but I find that it doesn't always hold for very long. So you can use it like kind of like flat and it'll hold. It's a double-sided sticky tape and it works for starting it out. At the end, we're going to need to use the big guns and pull out our hot glue to make sure it all stays shut. But I've got lots of glue. I don't have a lot of tape, so we're going to use glue instead. And now I want this to go onto an angle on my flower stem. So I'm going to roll this around. Now it's nice to have 2 layers of this because then you can see it started to kind of overlap on itself and there's more bits here. I'm just going to keep rolling this. And while this is rolling, I'm heating my glue gun because this last bit will need to get glued on extra strong because it will let loose if we don't. Or at least that's what I've found in the past. Just put a little dab of hot glue there at the end and let it dry. With the thin sticks for the stem, it's hard for this, just my regular crafting glue, to hold this in place. So I'm just gonna let that dry out. And I'm gonna do the same for my other ones. When I'm doing the 2 colored paper, since the paper is a lot thicker, I find that the original glue doesn't stick very well at the beginning spot. So even though I'm going to run a bead of glue along the edge to help the whole thing to stay together, I'm actually going to put 1 bead of hot glue right here at the end before I start, so that I've got a good starting point so that it stays in position while I'm rolling it, but also so that it stays in position after we're done making the flower. I'm just gonna put a dab of hot glue here on top. Oops, maybe a little bit too much. And we're gonna start to roll this baby. And now, finally double glue here to hold this all in place. Something to note though, when you're doing this, I've got these folded over because I didn't feel like cutting it more, but when you're rolling this out more, it's going to start to bend the paper here and it's can get a little bit funny and hard to roll. So just be aware of that. And sometimes when you're rolling, I'm using a really thin flower stem for these flowers this time. And sometimes when you're rolling it on these thin ones, it will rip the paper. So just be mindful of that when you're doing this. It's not the end of the world if it happens or not. It's just something to keep in mind. So when you're making them, you can have some ripping like you do right here, or you can have just some weird folds on it. But that's nothing to be concerned about, because when this is all done and there's a bunch of them, they're going to look nice together. So it's not going to be visible as an issue. Another way that we can do this is that we can just use one piece of paper, so it's not folded and it's just cut, and have one color or two colors with it together. Even have them offset a little bit, and then they don't need to be glued together or anything. They can just have a little dab of glue put on the end here so that it sticks to our stem. When we're doing individual pages, they don't tend to slip and rip as much, and they kind of twirl better, but not always. So you'll notice when it's not folded over, it has a nicer twirl to it. But you'll notice here we don't want to do it so that the end pops out from underneath, so that's not really showing. So when we're doing it this way, it's easier for that to pop out. So I have a bunch of these now. So what I need to do is just kind of play with all the pieces and loosen up these cut ends so that they have a little bit more texture and body to them. So don't worry, like if you've got a little bit of the stem showing, that's totally okay. We just want to kind of move this and make it a little bit more lifelike. So you've got more lifelike, and then like even this one here, see how small it is after I've rolled it. So we want to just move the pieces around. So now it's got a little bit more life, and we're going to do that to the rest of them as well. Now we've got a whole bunch of lavender stalks. So you can see here we've got the multicolored ones, the two colored ones kind of have a nice effect to them, but just the simple dark purple or light purple work really nicely. Also, one thing I want to show you is I did this before, and this is actually just using foam paper. So I've got a bunch of different colored foam papers, and so you can actually do it with foam paper as well, and it automatically kind of pops out a little bit more. And what I did with this one is I used 2 sheets of foam paper and just cut them out. So you've got sort of an option, or you can use foam paper, and you can also use different colors. You don't need to use just purples, because the lavender is purple, but vanilla has a similar look to this, and you can just make up your own flowers as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new crafting tutorial. New videos go up every Friday. I love how the lavender turned out, but now we're going to move on into hyacinth territory. This is another one of my personal favorites because this looks stunning on a shelf or in a vase. The supplies that we need for this craft is we need a few different colors of paper. You're going to want to have green for the stem, and then you can choose any sort of color that you would like for the actual petals of the hyacinths. Now I've got a whole bunch of different pieces of paper here of different colors, but your choices can be whatever you would like. Hyacinths are typically pretty bright, so I'm trying to use some nice bright colors. When I'm going to be cutting these pieces of paper, I'm going to be using 8.5 by 11. When you're cutting the paper out, you can either cut it along the 8.5 inch width side, or you can cut it along the 11 inch length side. I'm going to be cutting them across the 8.5 inch side, and I'm going to be cutting each piece of 8.5 inches by 2 inches. And that's going to be the same size for the stem and for the petals. Also, what we're going to need is either a paper cutter or scissors, depending on how you want to cut this. And then you're going to need some glue. I'm just going to use my crafting glue, but a glue stick works just as fine as well. I'm going to be cutting them across the 8.5 inch side, and I'm going to be cutting each piece of 8.5 inches by 2 inches. And that's going to be the same size for the stem and for the petals. So I've cut out a whole bunch of different colors of cardstock, and they're all sort of 2 inches wide and about 8 inches in length. And what I'm going to do with each one is I'm simply going to cut or whole bunch of strips, and you want them to be about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to cut this all the way through on all of these pieces. So this is a bit time consuming, so obviously I'm just going to fast forward this part of the video for you, and we'll meet up again in a few moments when I've got all these cut out. Now I'm just eyeballing it. You can actually like measure them out if you'd like, but you don't need to. Now that all of my petals are cut out, it's time to start rolling them. So what I've done is I have a little dowel here. This is about 1/8 of an inch in thickness, and I've sort of cut it in half here that you can see what I'm holding up with my nail, and I put some tape in so it doesn't fall apart on me. And I'm just going to roll these together. So I'm just going to roll them up, and I find that using a dowel helps because cardstock doesn't always roll nicely if you're not using it with something. So I'm just going to roll all of these up. Now this is going to take a while because I'm making a bunch of flowers, so bear with me while I roll these up, and we're just going to fast forward to the part where this is all done, and we'll continue from there. When you're done curling it, it should look sort of like this. You don't need to worry if some are closer or farther away from the edge or not curled the same distance, because once we start to assemble this as a flower, these are all going to be a little bit apart from each other, so it's going to look nice. To make the stem, we're going to use our green paper, and I've cut it to be 2 inches by 8.5 inches. Now, if you want the stems to be longer, I recommend that you cut your paper on the lengthwise so that you would have 11 inches this way on your 11.5 by 8.5 by 11 paper, or if you're using 12 by 12 cardstock, cutting it out to be the full 12 inches and 2 inches in width. And all we're going to do is just apply a bunch of glue onto this. And you can use craft glue or glue stick or whatever you want. This is my go-to glue, and I'm just going to curl it. And starting to curl this paper is a bit tricky because it's 60-pound cardstock, so it's a bit thick. So the first few like twists of it might come out a little bit square, but don't worry about that. Once you start to roll it, it will start to turn more circular, and you just want to roll it into a nice stem. And depending how tightly you start rolling this, it might turn out to be really short, but don't worry, I'll show you a trick on how to fix this. So right now I've made this in super short, so I'm just going to kind of twist it and loosen it and pull it apart, and now it's getting longer, and now I've got my stem made. Now since I'm just using crafting glue, I got to put a little dab here at the end, and then I have to hold this just for a few seconds so that this glue is shut. And now I have a whole bunch of stems ready to be used. Once all of the petals are rolled and your stems are rolled, it's time to assemble the two. So all you need to do is put a bunch of glue at the back. Now you can use glue, or you can even use double-sided tape, like the tape rolls that they've got. I just like to use glue. And then you're just going to attach this to the top, and you want to make sure the rolls are going downwards, not upwards like I was about to do. And we're just going to roll this onto the stem. Now when you're rolling this on, you want to make sure that you're not getting the petal curls stuck under the next level of paper that's rolling down. Now, of course, when I'm recording this isn't turning out as beautiful as it did for the last several that I made, but that's all right. And we're just going to roll this together like this and let the glue dry. Now, when you're rolling at the top, you want to try to get this part of the stem covered up if you can, but if you can't, that's all right. And there's the hyacinth right there. So I'm going to finish rolling all the rest of them, and then we'll take a quick peek at what they look like. I just wanted to quickly point out a little bit of a difference here when you're making these flowers. So these ones on this side I made cutting the 8.5 inch width of the paper, and these ones I made using kind of the 11-inch length of the paper. And you'll notice that they're quite different in size. But what I also did with these top parts, they're also cut on the long side. So these ones are cut on the 11-inch, and these are cut on the 8.5 inch. So you'll notice that when I have them together, the flowers are actually less long this way than they are this way, and they kind of are proportional to the stem. So if you're going to be cutting the 8.5 inch direction on your paper, I recommend that you do the color and the green the same size, and then the same thing I would suggest if you're doing the 11 inch, or if you're doing 12 by 12s, obviously it'll be the same, but if you're doing the 11 inch length, you want to do the 11 inch length for the flower portion as well. Now you can have longer flowers with shorter stems, it's just going to be harder to put this into some sort of a vase or anything. And again, you could do like shorter flowers with longer stems, but then you're just going to have a small flower and a long stem. So it depends on what kind of vase you want to put this into. Drop in the comments which flower is your favorite so far. I'm curious to hear. Okay, we're saving the best one for last. Paper roses. Beautiful, classic, and no cutting machine in sight. So let's finish this one off strong. The supplies that we need for this craft are 4 square pieces of paper, a pencil, and some scissors. And then you can also use a dowel if you'd like, but alternately you can use this pencil instead. The size of these squares isn't super important. The bigger that you have it, the bigger that your flower will be. These pieces that I have are 6 inches by 6 inches. And that size produces a flower about this big. If you make them smaller, your flowers are smaller. If you've got bigger squares, you have bigger flowers. But I have a bunch of these origami pieces of paper, which are perfect squares, so I don't need to cut them again into size. Now, these ones are different colors on different sides. So if you look at this flower, for example, I did before, you've got different shades and different colors, and it makes the flower kind of pop differently. But you can use just solid color, one color on both sides paper if you would like. So the first thing that we're going to do with each of our pieces of paper is we're going to fold it in half once, like so, and then we're going to fold it in half again, like so. And we're going to do that for all 4 pieces. Once we have all the folds done, we want to make sure that our corners are lined up at the bottom here. And this is going to help us draw a heart. Like so. Now you can draw separate hearts on each one, or you can trace one heart on each one, whichever you like. My heart drawing abilities today seem to be not fantastic. Now, once we have all of our hearts on here, you need to do a double check to make sure you've got the folded edge here and the folded edges here. And then we're just going to cut out the hearts. Now, I've drawn them on the paper with pencil so that I've got markings for it. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Now we're going to have 4 pieces that look like this. Now each piece is going to be cut differently. This first piece, we're going to cut out 1/2 of a heart. The second piece, we're going to cut out a full heart. The third piece, we're going to cut out 1.5 hearts, so we'll cut out this part. And then the fourth piece, we're going to cut in half. And we're going to use all the pieces once we're done cutting these out. So I'm quickly going to cut these out and I'll line them up so that we can see what I was talking about. And now this second half, we don't need this, so we're gonna put this aside for later. So what you should have, I'm gonna try to line these up better so that we can see what we've got here. So we're gonna use all of these pieces from our flowers, from our cuts. Now what we're going to do is each of these pieces we're going to curl in and fold them in so that they kind of fold in on each other like this. And so I'm just going to put a bead of glue along the edges and glue these in so that they're like a cone. I'm just going to overlap this like this and let this dry. And I'm going to do this for all of my pieces. Now the 2 last pieces I find are difficult to curl. So you might need to take some time with these ones, but they do get there. And I find that to keep this one round, it's easy to put a pencil in here to help that out. All right, so now we have all of our flowers rolled, kind of look like this. The next thing that we want to do is we want to curl the edges. So it's sort of like so. See how this one's got all the curled edges. Now, depending on what size of a roll you use to curl the edges, you'll get a different type of curl. So just to give you an example, this one here has a less rounded curl. This was from using a pencil, and this was from using an 1/8 inch dowel. So there's a difference in the size, and it will take you some time to play with what you want the flower to look like. I kind of like this bigger, looser one, but if you like the smaller one, you can use a smaller dowel. So all you do is you take your pencil or your dowel and you roll your flower petals around it. And that's it. So we're just going to do them all one by one to give them a bit of a curl. Now it's harder to do it with the pencil because it doesn't have as much pull on the paper, but it still gives it a nice look. Share this video with a friend who keeps saying they want to try crafting. This is the perfect place to start. And these last two are a bit harder to curl because there's not much give to them. So you can or you cannot curl them, that's totally your choice. And this last one I'm not going to. So these are now ready to go, and they sort of all have like a nice little curl to them. So what you can do now is you have two options on how to glue this. You can either just use your regular glue or you can use hot glue. I'm just going to use my regular glue, and all you need to do is pour a little bit into the middle here and then pop the next piece on top. And when I'm putting these on, I sort of want them to be like a little bit offset. Now each flower petal is smaller than the one below, so they should offset themselves naturally, but that's not always the case. And then so we're just going to keep putting in more and more layers of this flower, like so. Now this glue dries pretty quickly, so I don't have to worry about it taking too long to glue. But when you're not using a hot glue gun, you do need to make sure that these pieces kind of fit in and actually touch themselves because they're not being hot glued. And these smaller ones I like to actually glue here, and I'll even sometimes snip off this little bit of an end so that it's not totally stuck in there. And now these last two I cut off a bigger portion because they're kind of going to stick inside more. And I'm just going to put some glue on there, rotate this around, and then the last one as well. And there you have the rose. Now you'll see with this one I've got the leaves are looser. They're not as curled like this one here that I did earlier with the other one. So you've got some options of how you would like it to look. I personally like the less curled look, and that's it. And there we have it. And there you have it, 4 gorgeous blooms, no fancy equipment, and hopefully a few minutes of time just for yourself, because that's kind of what this channel is about. And if you've made any of these flowers, I would absolutely love to hear about it. Be sure to drop a comment below and let me know how they turned out and which ones you made. If you've enjoyed this video, I've left some other videos here for you to watch where we can do some more crafting together. Thanks so much for watching, and happy crafting!